Welcome to everyone here in person today, and to everyone who is visiting our service from home. We Unitarians of Lake Norman are an open and inclusive congregation. As we've heard, our members walk diverse paths to find meaning and purpose. But the thing that unites us is our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all, and by the responsibility to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Sandy McFeely, and I've been an active member of this congregation since 2013. We also have a key person in our excellent music department with us today, Mike Alec. His backup orchestra has been delayed. We have a guest speaker today. Dr. M. Benjamin Thorne is with us. It's his second visit to this building, the meeting house, but I think it's his first visit to our congregation here. Dr. Thorne's topic today couldn't be more timely. The German literary scholar Theodor Adorno famously said, "To write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric." What are we to understand about that today in our world of endless crisis with animosities growing by the minute? Dr. Thorne will share his own journey, as he says, weaving in and out of doubt and faith, as he studied still studies crimes committed during the Holocaust by Nazi-allied governments in Hungary and Romania, particularly those targeting the Roma or Gypsies. And he continues to write poetry. We start our services and other activities by lighting a candle inside a chalice and speaking words that call us to that occasion. Please join me in saying today's chalice lighting words, which are in your order of service. We light this flaming chalice to illuminate the world we see. In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. There we go. Third time is a charm. Our opening words today are from Albert Schweitzer. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. Please stay comfortably seated now as Mike takes us with his music into a place of worship and contemplation.
I've played this several times, but it's still unfortunately appropriate. While my guitar gently weeps.
Greetings. How is everyone this afternoon? Excellent. I'd like to thank, I guess in absentia, Reverend Job for inviting me to speak to you today. This came about because he saw a poem of mine published in an online faith-based literary journal called Braided Way, based, I think, somewhere here in North Carolina, actually. And he asked me to share a bit about my faith, about my poetry, and also about some of the themes in it. And many of those themes deal with my day job as a historian. So I'll be trying to weave those various threads in together, hopefully successfully. I am an enormous introvert by nature. And, normally when I'm teaching or giving a talk, I can put on a mask and it's fine. But it's been quite the, when was inauguration? It's been quite the period, I'll say. So if I appear nervous, I apologize. It's certainly not due to the hospitality that I've already experienced since being here. So the poem that I referenced, the one that Reverend Job came across, I'll get to that at the end of the talk. But to get there, because it's centered around a certain kind of faith, I think I need to explain there's some ground that I have to cover. So for today's purposes, you should know that religiously speaking, I am a doubter. I do believe that there's a spiritual force in this universe that, for lack of a better word, I call God. But as to the deity enshrined in the Abrahamic tradition, the Judeo-Christo-Islamic tradition, must confess I harbor reservations. Whenever I encounter someone of unshakable faith, I immediately distrust them. To me, there is no well so shallow as unsearched faith. Maybe the best way to understand where I'm coming from on this point is to share another poem. This is entitled A/Theism. So think of the word atheism, put a backslash between the A and the T. Easier to do when you're looking at it than trying to do it in your mind. But odd, the definite certainty of articles, always one of many or just the one. Where is there space for mystery, the uncertain, the quantifiably unknown? We need a place to express the middle between A and the. How else to riddle life's complexities? A verbal Schrodinger's box, a veritable pocket dimension for both the verifiable and the un. Take atheism. Too sure of its abnegation in the face of proof's absence? Could it be replaced with atheism, neither resolute nor relative, nor the indifference of the agnostic, but a diagnostic that defers and upholds any and all possibilities to which it refers? A place where God can and cannot be, where fulcrum balanced doubt and faith coexist in searching earnestness. But what to call it? It is a whisper in the mind. It is the soul. It is the metaphysical light pooling in the farthest black hole. So yeah, doubter. At the same time, I am also a person of faith. Quakerism, its values and praxis, speaks to me in a language I understand intuitively, but often can't articulate. So it's very meaningful to me that this service is being held here. In the gathered silence of meeting for worship, I have felt that peace that passeth understanding, and felt the persistent tugging that friends call a leading when threshing over difficult matters. Sometimes when I look at the beauty of the natural world, it is hard not to believe in some creator who wrought such beauty into being with intent. The world is full of small miracles. The perfect math of a snail shell's curl, the clever way Amylite traps the aurora borealis in stone, or the gentle embrace of morning glories instinctively curling around a supporting frame. Navigating between those poles of doubt and faith can be a little tricky. In my day job, I research, teach, and write about the Holocaust. In high school, like many people my age, I was first introduced to the topic in a serious way through Schindler's List. And after reading the book and seeing the film, I knew that I had to dedicate my life to learning as much as I could about it. Again, what friends call a leading. It was a moral imperative to me. Eventually, it led me to earning a PhD in history and doing research on the Holocaust in Romania and Ukraine. So essentially, that's what I eat, sleep, breathe, day in, day out, and it can be a dark space to inhabit. In light of the atrocities that adorn my mental life, I struggle fiercely with the concept of intervention by a loving divine being. And if you'll humor me, I'd like to read another poem that I think highlights what I'm trying to convey. The Argument. When I was 9, God was a bush aflame, a sacred secret burning thing, alive in some empty and forsaken desert. At 10, he became a name invoked over the bodies of dead relatives I once knew, lowered into the strange earth. God has a plan, they say. What plan could possibly require children gunned down at recess or choir? You, who fashioned all from nothing with a simple wish. You, for whom time and matter are merely silken strands to weave as you desire. I stand at Babi Yar's edge, peering down to where 33,771 Jews and hundreds of thousands of others were laid low. Here, the woman who saw her daughter shot just before. There, an old man still thinking his life can be bought for 4 teeths worth of gold. Where were you then when the barrel roughly muzzled the nape of this boy's neck? The scratches etched by finger bones on gas chamber walls, each of them spells Yahweh. Did you provide them one last sweet breath? There are times I wish to disbelieve in you, banish you into superstitious myth, but still my faith persists, because only in a universe so infinite as to contain you could such cruelty exist. It is at times I feel you with me that are the most unforgivable. In this poem, I highlight my personal wrestling with notions of faith and divine love when compared to the historical reality of the Holocaust. Perhaps now's a good point to discuss what that word faith even means to me. I've wrestled with this for a very long time, and the best I can do is this. It's our internal attempt to wrest order and meaning from the chaos of the external, to shape it into something legible to our soul. Poetry then is like a manifestation or maybe type of faith, a reaching out to perceive something peripheral to ourselves and hold it in the mind and shape it with sound and sense. Poetry is a way to shout our passions, our fears, our love out into the void and hopefully hear it echo in someone else's mind. It brings us closer together and can render painful experiences into beauty. But how does one write poetry in the aftermath of genocide. Theodor Adorno, one of the most brilliant philosophical minds of the 20th century, grappled with this question. A half-Jewish German who went into exile during World War II. Afterwards, he wrote the famous quote, "To write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric." As a historian, as a poet, as a person, those words sit heavy with me. They meet my eyes from the page like Medusa's stare. How can one maintain faith in light of such atrocity? How can there be any beauty, any poetry capable of escaping that vortex? I ask these questions every day. I don't have any answers, but sometimes I do, I think, hear the whisper of one. And I'd like to share with you an example that comes from my research. So primarily I work on Holocaust crimes perpetrated by Romania, Nazi ally. Many people don't know this, but Romania operated concentration camps located in Ukraine, which it partially occupied during the war. It sent hundreds of thousands of Jews and tens of thousands of Roma to those camps. And it's the experience of those Romani or Gypsy victims that I focus on. Unlike the concentration camps that are so well known that were operated by the Germans in Poland, like Auschwitz, the ones operated by Romania were built from temporary building materials, wood, basically, and there is nothing left of them, no physical structures, no trace. And so over time, people forgot where they were. They were named after the village or town they were in some proximity to, but their precise locations, that was just not part of our sort of living memory, you could say, of what happened there. Not just when I say our, I mean in a broader context, but certainly for Romanians who know very little about what their country did, but also for Ukrainians who live in the country where it occurred. So my research partner and I, as we were talking about our work one day, we kind of stumbled upon this fact that where are these camps actually, exactly? And so we started going to Ukraine to try to locate them. In order to do that, it required going to very difficult to reach places, these out in the middle of nowhere villages, and finding people who had been alive at the time that we could talk to. And that was a very difficult exploration. There was one small village near which a very important camp was located. And when we went there, the first 9 people that we talked to denied that there had ever even been a Jewish population living in that town. It wasn't until we got to the 10th person that we found someone who had been there and was willing to share some of her knowledge. She couldn't speak precisely to the location of the camp, but there was one place she wanted us to go to, and that was the Jewish cemetery. She told us roughly how to get there. Directions were vague, but eventually we found it. It was small, and as we walked through the cemetery and looked at the headstones and looked at the dates, it was very obvious that this community had been virtually annihilated during the Holocaust. Very few people survived, or perhaps survived and came back. There's always the chance they went elsewhere. And the last headstone, so the last member of that community to have lived there and passed away, was from the early 90s. Some of these headstones were in very bad disrepair. The cemetery was overgrown with weeds and tall grass. It was not being taken care of. There were some graves that obviously had been recently dug up. People perhaps looking for gold. That's not unknown in that part of the world. But one thing that struck us is that we found one gravestone, not the most recent, but I think the second most, if memory serves. and it had fresh flowers on it. Now, let me ask you, do you know why that immediately seized our attention? Why? Obviously, someone cared about that person. Absolutely. Anything else as to why that was so significant? Fresh flowers at this grave. They remember.
They were there recently.
Relatively recently, yes. So someone apparently had been there relatively recently.
And the population, you said it been decimated.
Yes.
Left there.
Right. Yes. There's one other key, very important detail. Yeah. What's that? Well, so yes, it was, in the midst of all this gray and sort of dying grass, because this is late summer, the flowers were a shock of color. Yeah. Someone must know something, right? You wouldn't randomly show up in a cemetery that was very hard to find and get to, and then randomly place fresh flowers you randomly had with you, right? Yes. Thank you. That is the key. Yes. In Jewish funerary custom, you don't leave flowers, you place a stone. So what this means is that there was someone, presumably someone from this village, who had some person, and obviously wasn't Jewish, but had some personal connection to who was buried there and cared enough to visit, to mark that connection. And just the mental image of those flowers at that grave and understanding this broader context that I've just shared with you, it's like a novel in just one image to me. And it's that connection, the person who cared enough, who remembered, to the deceased, but yet obviously not of their community, and apparently did not know, right, the I guess, quote unquote, proper way to mark that person's memory when visiting. To me, that I think is a space that gets created, that God fills. And I think that is as close to an answer to Adorno's dilemma as we can get. This is probably going to be a controversial statement, so I apologize. But to me, looking for God in Auschwitz, attempting to rescue or redeem some sense of beauty from that place, I don't think it can be done. I've been there. I challenge anyone to visit and not leave utterly shattered. No, to me, God is best found in the small spaces we create between us through acts of courage and kindness, even ones as simple as laying flowers on a grave. So now I'd like to turn to that poem that caught Reverend Job's attention, The Peaceable Kingdom. And I should say that when I wrote this, it was before the massacre of October 7th and everything that followed. This is before. The Peaceable Kingdom. If only the Archangel Gabriel would visit and with holy host proclaim, children of creation, let there be no anchor for rancor in the Dead Sea, no fuel for cruelty in Bethlehem. Let people enjoy temple, steeple, and mosque, and let their lives and their loves, and live their lives and their loves without mayhem. Perhaps the shredding shrapnel that shocks us into rage at loss would cease, and we could reclaim our lease on the peaceable kingdom, calm and stable, and at long last not till the soil of hatred to bitter harvest in the sacred homeland. The poem begins with a pronouncement by a divine herald. But the work, the action must be undertaken by us. Quakers speak of the inner light, the still small voice that speaks unto our condition. I felt that light burn inside me and heard that voice, but I do not turn to it for the world's redemption. That is our charge. We even find this notion enshrined in a core tenet of Judaism, tikkun olam, repairing the world. For those who are able, by all means, turn to the divine for comfort. But I would argue that the only way forward, the only way to repair the world, is through the hands that wrought not its creation, but its destruction. And this task begins by defending and lifting up the least among us. For Americans, that means communities targeted by the Trump administration, new Americans, LGBT community members, people of color, women, those with disabilities and chronic illnesses, and the poor. How many of you attended a No Kings protest yesterday? Almost all of you. Good, good. But the work is just beginning. Attending a protest is important. Being public, visible in our dissent is important. Not ceding the public square is important. But that is not all of the work. If we want to see a manifestation of the divine, look into the face of a child who has escaped war and hunger to arrive at our shores and is given a warm bed. Witness it in the courage of the disenfranchised, insisting that their vote be counted. Find it in a meal provided to those who struggle to feed themselves. The more of these moments we make, the more spaces we create between one another. Not absences, but spaces filled with love. The closer I think we come to God, or God comes to us. Thank you. Oh, that's right, the talk back. Right. Sorry.
The very best part of the afternoon. Your comments, your questions. What did Dr. Thorne's talk make you think of? It made me think of a sign I saw yesterday at the Mooresville Parade. When you spoke at the beginning about being an introvert.
Sandy, use the
I know
mic.
about being an
Louder.
introvert. One of the signs I saw at yesterday's rally in Mooresville was, "Things are so bad, even the introverts are here."
Yeah.
I suspect Tim has something to
Sure.
So I need some clarification on the facts. How many people were in camps in Ukraine from Romania? I mean, however you want to express it. It's not the Jews from Germany. It's
No. These are Jews from portions of Romania, and Jews who are in that area of Ukraine, Romania occupied during the war. So basically, as a reward for fighting alongside Nazi Germany and participating in the invasion of the Soviet Union, beginning in the summer of 1941, Hitler awarded Romania this chunk of southern Ukraine. So if in the past 2 years following the news about the second invasion by Russia of Ukraine, if you're familiar with the city of Odessa on the Black Sea, Odessa was Romania's administrative headquarters for this region that's at the time was called Transnistria. It's a little confusing because there's this other area that's now called Transnistria that they kind of map over, but they're not the same. So yeah. But in terms of numbers, about 300,000 Romanian Jews total. And numbers are hard to get at here. But something like 52,000 Roma. And I would argue that is a gross underestimate. There's a lot of work still that actually needs to be done that I and other people are working on, but the mortality rate for them was 50%. 50% of all Roma sent to a camp died there or en route.
Thank you very much.
I can see why Pat Job wrote to you about your poem. It sounds so much like him in his endless search for the spaces where there is a connection, an opportunity for love, or it just grows out of the situation. I think you two must be soulmates somehow.
It could be.
One very quick errata for my leaky memory. I forgot to mention Greg being not just at the Concord demonstration yesterday, but being a marshal there. But on your approach to questioning, you bring to mind, I'm going to use an oxymoron. A friend of ours who calls himself a retired theologian. Is there such a thing as a retired theologian? But he introduced us to the concept of possibilianism, which sort of says it all in the term. But it is a subscribed belief system.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your poems. I love them. Question, wondering your visit to trying to find the camps in the cemetery. What was the timing in comparison to the Ukrainian war? And was it before? Was that around the death?
It was before.
Your thoughts about all that's going on?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, been to Ukraine several times to conduct this field work, some archival research as well, but mainly field work with my research partner. And this is obviously before the invasion. It's far, far, far too dangerous to go there now. And in fact, one of the archives that I worked in, I believe, sustained heavy damage at one point in the city Mykolaiv. So these were summer trips. It's just the nature of academic work. If you're not on sabbatical or have a fellowship, you go during the summers, right? And the last summer that we were able to go was, I believe, the summer of 2019. So then COVID hit. And we kept waiting and waiting for the pandemic to end so that we could go back. So that put our research on hold. And then just as the pandemic really was receding to the point where people were really traveling, right? Russia invades. And so that work is still on hold, which is enormously frustrating to us as researchers in terms of the sense of responsibility that we feel to get this story out there. It's a source of frustration for my dean, who's wondering where the book is. But yeah, so that's the time frame roughly in which this occurred. Oh, I'm sorry, my thoughts about the current conflict, is that what else? Yeah, so I will say this. When Russia, and by the way, for those who aren't fully aware, this is the second time Russia has invaded Ukraine. The first time they invaded, they occupied Crimea, and then they took some of the eastern regions, parts of the Donbass region, basically, and then the full-fledged invasion. A lot of people in those first few days said that Ukraine would fall. But I had been there. I had seen convoys of troops on the highway, because this was our research session after the first invasion, obviously. And the look of grim determination on their faces, which I recalled as I was seeing things unfold, I knew that Ukrainians would fight. They would not give up, and they would not fold. And that has borne out, but at tremendous cost. I think a lot of mistakes were made in terms of calculations, in terms of support, and this is very hard for me to say as a Quaker. I think of myself as a pacifist. The Friends meeting of Austin, I guess you could say, is my mother meeting. And there was a member there, Margaret Hoffman, who was a Holocaust survivor. She was half Jewish. She lost her mother in Auschwitz. Dedicated pacifist, very, very influential in a number of different pacifist organizations, including Fellowship for Reconciliation. She and I were talking one day in the kitchen about this, and she said, you know, after the first bullet flies, you have to ask whether it's appropriate to be a pacifist. Now, she wasn't saying, she didn't mean at the time that we just throw it out the window, we pull our, but that there are certain calculations that have to be made. It's been very frustrating to me to see the policy, the Biden administration certainly, but absolutely the Trump administration, and the deplorable way in which he has kowtowed to Putin at every single turn, buying the Russian narrative as to why the war is fought, repeating Russian propaganda about, how Ukraine is just this close to, there's no hope, we should just stop everything that people in occupied territories want to be part of Russia. That's been very hard for me. Where things stand right now, unfortunately, I think Ukraine is going to have to give up territory. It's not fair. I worry deeply about the Ukrainians who will be caught on the wrong side of that border, especially their children who will have their Ukrainian identity denied them. But that's the reality. The question is how much? And we'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you for your presentation. Regarding the true believers, I think somebody said here that if you find somebody who's seeking the truth, embrace them. If you find somebody who says they found the truth, run. There was a protest sign yesterday that said protest like it's 1939 Germany. I certainly agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I know people in Germany who said that they initially thought Hitler was just crazy, but they thought it'll be all right,
Yes.
and they let it go too far. And then the last thing, and I'll sit down and ask you to talk about, I'm literally scared about this latest turn of events, bombing Iran. I know that they're trying to bring them to the table, but I don't think this will do it. And I think Iranians are going to use the same argument that Jews argue, that we can't survive if you exist. And I don't know the end of that, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. To that point, protests like it's 1939. As somebody who works on the Holocaust, I always get a little whenever someone wants to utilize the Holocaust as an allegory for whatever is happening. I especially don't like it when, this is the blank Holocaust. It's like, no, it's not, right? It's terrible. It's terrible. It's horrible. You don't need to appropriate a specific historical event to describe something else that's not related to it, right? But I will say that there are a number of similarities, resonances, echoes between what we saw in Germany with the rise of the Nazi Party and its seizure of power, and what we're seeing in this country with the hollowing out of democratic institutions, replacing their personnel with like-minded yes men. That was very consciously Nazi policy. It is terrifying, absolutely. As to the point about Iran, Netanyahu's strategy, I believe, has been to try to prolong conflict for as long as he can to enable him to stay in power as long as possible to avoid prosecution. He's facing charges of corruption, abuse of power, etc. The longer he can prolong conflict, the more likely he is to escape any of that, while he's also reshaping Israel's governmental structure to his benefit. Where all that leads, I don't know.
Thank you very much for your great presentation. And actually, I have two things. One that just popped up, and that is, I totally disagree with you about Ukraine needing to cede territory in order to bring about an end to that war. Primarily because ceding territory, while it may stop the fighting temporarily, it will not bring an end to that conflict. It will continue on. But the other thing that I really wanted to mention was, in your research, looking at the Holocaust and everything else, looking at the terrible things that occurred during that time for those people, you must have also seen a great deal of heroism, people stepping up to resist what was going on. And the beauty of that I think would bring about some kind of, I don't know, solace to the research that you're doing, the whole thing, looking at humanity in the overall.
Yeah, certainly. So to the first point, if I said that ceding territory would end the war, I don't know if I said that, but if I did, that's not what I actually think. No, I do think that Ukraine will have to cede territory. I don't think that's going to end the long-term conflict with Russia, certainly not while Putin is in charge. Now, in Ukraine's constitution, it's actually illegal for it to cede. It cannot do that legally. There's no legal mechanism by which it can do that unless it changes the constitution. That's one thing that our current administration either doesn't understand or doesn't care. I don't guess we should be at all surprised that, Trump's approach is, well, who cares what their constitution says, right? But I'm looking at the reality on the ground and what Ukraine is capable of militarily without an incredibly substantial boost in its resources in terms of being able to push Russians out of where they currently are. As things stand now, it's just not possible. They can regain some of that, certainly. But there's a reason why their strategy has really switched primarily to these drone attacks, right? They don't have the human resources available for another major offensive like the one they launched during the summer. They don't. So unless NATO's willing to, step in, right, and fight shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine, I don't see how it's possible. But no, I absolutely agree. That's not going to end the conflict. That is absolutely true. And as for solace, yes, absolutely. Sure. I mean, there are, if you look at the record, it's replete with stories of people who stand up and at great personal risk, right, make their dissent heard or undertake actions to aid those who are being targeted. Absolutely, right? I do take some solace from that. It's hard because for every person who does do that, there's another person who goes the opposite direction, right? I'm not saying it's a wash in a moral sense, but it's just something that I struggle with, But yes, I do find some solace in that, absolutely.
The other part to that is, remember, the other side won. Hitler was defeated. The Holocaust was ended.
Well, that's true. It's also true that, 2/3 of world Jewry were already dead by that point. So, but yes, in the end, he was defeated. In the end, the Holocaust was ended. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
I loved your poem, and it reminded me, and your story, reminded me a lot of something I was listening to lately, a podcast. I was wondering your thoughts on it. Specifically, they were talking about how the Holocaust has been taught to us, and how we, as children, learn about the Holocaust through individualized narratives instead of a more collective approach to trauma, right? And that somewhere along the line, when trauma theory developed, it almost acted like a depoliticizing force in regards to collective trauma. And that COVID really brought this to the surface in our country, because finally we were all experiencing something quite traumatic together, when we had been taught that trauma is very individualized and experienced, and to trespass on that can even be called appropriative. And I'm wondering what your thoughts on that, because it's been stewing in my mind. When you say that God is found in the spots between us, I've heard opposite types of philosophers say that the space between us is where things like hypercapitalism thrives, or destructive ideas thrive. So it's very nice to hear you have a positive idea of the space between us, the outside, the things we don't know. So my thoughts.
Thank you. I'll try my best to address those.
It's kind of heady, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the kind of question that normally I would want to sit with for a while before answering. I think I've got like a minute, so this is my bonehead response. But to your point about collective trauma and narrative formation, that's something that is very important to me, because as someone who works primarily on a victim group that's often excluded from narratives, and to the extent they are, it's usually by this tokenism, right? It's very frustrating. I mean, still, it's 2025, and I'm often the token Roma guy at some Holocaust-related conference or whatever, which, as someone who's Gaje, non-Roma, I feel icky about, right? I've done my best to lift up, colleagues and friends who work in this field who are Romani. But let me approach it this way. Often, our understanding of the Holocaust, I think, is impeded by competing claims of victimhood, which is to say that it's very difficult for some groups who also experienced massive collective trauma to appreciate, right, what happened during the Holocaust. And most immediately, from my own research, I can bring the example, well, two examples. One, Roma themselves, and what happened to them, the methodology, not all, but many of the reasons involved, they overlap as to essentially be the same. And yet, right, there's still this exclusion that we see. But in Ukraine, before World War II started for the Soviet Union, because it starts there after it does in other parts of the world, right? Soviet Ukraine had already experienced a massive collective trauma through an artificial man-made famine that some scholars, including I, am inclined to label as a genocide, the Holodomor, perpetrated by Stalin. So, in other words, to punish Soviet Ukraine for its opposition to his policies about collectivization and other things, he starved Ukraine intentionally, took every scrap of food that could be found out of it, made it impossible for Ukrainians to leave. When you try to talk about the Holocaust to Ukrainians, and again, when you think about the Holocaust, so many people just think of Poland, and like that's the and stop. But the research now is shifting further east, because we're learning now about far more instances of mass shootings and the locations of smaller camps than we did before. But if you go to Ukraine, you talk to them about this, they're kind of often nonplussed or defensive, And part of that has to do with very difficult truths about Ukrainian collaboration. But part of that has to do with their own experience with that famine. Okay, 6 million Jews died during this. Well, 2 million Ukrainians died, or the numbers sometimes get vastly inflated, but, so you suffered, we suffered, lots of you died, lots of us died. Who are you to say that yours is so important, right? That competitive victimhood when it comes to collective trauma is very difficult to work around. And so what I try to do is to find ways to bridge the individual with the collective in terms of representations of what happened. I'm not going to claim that I do it well or perfectly, or I'm an example, right? But that's what I try to do. And when you get down to the universe of private, personal suffering, the pain that you feel, is that substantively different if you are a Bosniak who lost most of your family during the Bosnian genocide, who may have personally experienced rape as part of that genocide because it was part of Serbs' policy? Is that substantively different than the pain of another individual who lost most of their family in the Holocaust? Right? And so trying to get those narratives to speak to each other, right, is in some ways more fruitful than trying to compare these collective traumas. At least that's what I've experienced.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. That was a wonderful.
Thank you.
And now Mike Alec has the creative task and challenge of responding to all of this with music.
Give it a shot.
So my grandfather was from Odessa, so it all is close to home. He escaped when he was 7, brought 2 little sisters to New York, and started a new life. Brooklyn, and then New Jersey, where I'm from. This song is about two people caught up in a war they don't want to be in. Take my hand now, it's coming down tonight. Coast is clear, push away your fright. Gonna take a run later, straight across the sand. Hide your tears now, oh, any way you can. Take a quarantine, wish it down some hole. Wash your wounds, try to wash your soul. Cross the line at midnight, hiding from the moon. Can't return now, not anytime soon. You think you hear a sound as you're marching to the beat. The bottom line falls out, hey, you know you can't retreat. You stumble on as you try to reach another dawn. No one hears and no one knows, but someone should start to pick up the road. got a message right before the end. Take your hero and give me back my friend. Watch his spirit rise up higher than the sun. Wipe your hands now, another day it's you think you know the truth, brother, you bow your head down low as the preacher starts to sing the sad song, brother, carries on. The sad song, carries on. Yes.
Ben, Mike, that was fabulous. And you all, this was one of the best talkbacks I've heard since I've been here. Okay. This fellowship is important to all of us. The contributions we make today allow us to sustain and grow our congregation and to reach out to our community, and both nearby and in the larger world. Your giving affirms our commitment to each other and to the community. And may I suggest to the viewers at home to switch briefly to the main page of our website and just hit the donate button so you feel at one with us here in this room. With grateful hearts, we receive these gifts. May they encourage us to live lives of integrity, compassion, and peace. We're also grateful to all the people who make possible our Sunday services, all our various community activities, and presenting us to the outside world via the newsletter, YouTube, and social media. And that includes everyone who comes and sits in these chairs on Sunday, or in their Barca loungers at home. Take a look with me, please, at the announcements in your order of service. First, I have a confession, which should be obvious to many people, that I didn't read the newsletter all the way through. I know, I'm sorry. Therefore, I didn't know that our trustee at large position is no longer open. Natalie Helling has agreed to fill out the rest of Mary's term. Everyone, especially visitors and guest speakers, is invited to join us at a local restaurant right after the service.
We're going to go to McAllister's and Cornelius.
McAllister's and Cornelius. And if anyone doesn't know where that is and would like to, Linda will be happy to tell you. Okay, Linda also runs Movie Tuesdays. The movie this week is The Life of Chuck at 1:40. For more information, contact Linda, or as many people do, just show up. The Heart of the Carolinas UU Animal Ministry, its next fence build is next Saturday morning for 3 big pitties named Smoke, Grizzly, and Skippy Doodle. Just pick a name that calls out to you and help build for them.
You gotta want to build fences for dogs named like that.
I would think so, yeah. Okay, the Friday Action Hour, 11 o'clock on Fridays on Zoom. It really does make a difference. And there was a great representation from our congregation there on Friday. And there were well over 60 people on the Zoom call. Are there any announcements I should have made? And
Turn the page over, Sandy.
well, it's not on this page, but for people who don't know it, but would like to visit with us every single Sunday, we're taking July off. We usually do that. It's somehow all too much, but there'll be services through all the Sundays in June, and then we'll resume on August 3rd. So you get July off August also. Okay. Our closing song is number 1031, May I Be Filled with Loving Kindness. We'll sing it 3 times, but note that the pronouns change from I to you to we as the singing progresses.
May I be filled with love and kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with love and kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with love and kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with love and kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with love and kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with love and kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
Our closing words are from the Unitarian minister Edward Everett Hale, who lived around the turn of into the 20th century. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something I can do. We close our services by extinguishing the light in the chalice and saying together the words in your order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts till we meet again. Go in peace.